Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It's Friday, December 27th. Derek Van Riper, Eno Saris here with you on this episode. We have yet another round of transactions. We have trades, we have signings, we have trades that created space for signings, a little bit of everything as this offseason continues to be a very, very busy one from a transactional purposes point of view. Eno, how have the holidays been treating you so far?
Good. We had a frenzy of pack opening. Bought them a box of collector boosters in Magic, those are kind of expensive packs, but also some Stadium Club and some Topps Chrome, and we just blew through them. And the Magic cards actually produced some good stuff. The baseball cards, the best thing we got was like a Davis Schneider autographed card.
Oh. Yeah.
It's pretty good.
Not quite what you were hoping for in those baseball boxes, but as long as you had fun opening them together, I guess that's the point of the exercise, right? Is you really have to enjoy the process of opening the cards.
It's fun, but it also is a little bit of an allegory to the whole process, which is you buy the thing, you have it in front of you, and then the opening takes half an hour, 15 minutes.
Yeah.
I mean, we just blew through them. I mean, it's in dollars to minutes ratio. It's not so good. We had, a whole tree set up, and I took a before and after picture, and the after picture was like an hour and 10 minutes afterwards, and it was just a war zone. I mean, we just blew through it. I know some families are like, very intentional with every gift. This gift was from blah, blah, blah to blah, blah, blah. We are more of a sit and rip, and I think people all got fun stuff and are happy with it. But the good news is we're still all playing with things that were given on Christmas. We haven't gone already back to like other stuff.
It's been 2 days. Well, if you ever have to face the blah 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 family on Family Feud, I'm gonna guess the public's gonna root for the blah 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 family instead of your family. That's going to see the kindness in the blah 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 family.
Yeah. No, we're just a grip it and rip it.
I think that's the age of your kids too, right? I mean, like we're more in the this is what a present is and this is how you open it phase.
Don't eat it.
Don't eat it. Yeah, we're thankfully not having that problem. It's the good news is we could take whatever presents we had for them and just give them like one or two a day. And this could take a month. Like we can stretch this out as long as we want to. So totally different phase of life. But I remember that phase that you're in right now as a kid where you get up Christmas morning, everything was open in like an hour and you're like, oh, it's over.
Yeah.
I'm going to wait till next year again. This stuff's awesome, but you really do have to pace yourself. Yeah. A lot of ground to cover, though, today. And by the way, you can join our Discord with the link in the show description if you haven't done that. Going to have some stuff rolling out here once the new year gets here. Try to enhance the experience for those who are already there. And for those who have yet to join, easy place to find some community. We begin today's show with some sad news from the baseball world. Rickey Henderson passed away at the age of 65. And I went back and listened to his Hall of Fame speech because I actually never listened to it before. And it's kind of one of the magical things about the technology we have today is you can go back and relive various moments in history that maybe would have been very hard to access before YouTube and the internet. And the thing that really struck me as I listened to Rickey's speech was for a guy who I think was known in sound bites, talking about himself in the third person and being extremely confident, he was very humble throughout his entire speech. His entire speech was thanking all the people that supported him throughout his life that got him to where he was. And you could just tell like there was a lot more to Rickey than we saw on the field, of course. And I think there are some things he did on the field that we're never going to see again. I don't think we're ever going to see 1,406 stolen bases from player in their career, even with the new stolen base rules. I don't think that's ever going to happen. I mean, Rickey's got the all-time record for runs scored, 2,295. Guys don't play enough games anymore and have long enough careers anymore to break a record like that. He led off 81 games with a homer. He had 2,129 unintentional walks. And then one that popped for me a few years ago when we were doing the retro drafts during the beginning of COVID, 130 steals in that 1982 season just jumps off the page too. But just a dynamic player who was a must-see player too, right? I think in a sport that was always longing for getting people to tune in, Rickey was that player. He was the reason to watch.
Yeah, and so many parts of his game I think are underrated. I mean, almost 300 homers, 297 homers. He wasn't just a slapstick guy. He had seasons with 28 homers, 2 of them. Just a lot of great seasons. From the power aspect. Like you mentioned, the walks, a 16% walk rate. We think of Joey Votto as, in some ways, the king of OBP of our time. Joey Votto's OBP for his career was 409. Rickey Henderson's was 401. Mm-hmm. He's right there with him in terms of, maybe he's not the king of OBP, but he was an excellent, the prototypical leadoff hitter. Even if you want to say he had like a little bit too much power for that, like it's great to lead off a game with a homer. Like it works for the team, like all of a sudden you're just ahead. You start the game with a lead, and then, you mentioned the softer side. Sam Blum has a really great story about how he ended his career in the independent league as a manager, basically, mm-hmm. and all the great things he did as a manager, as a coach. And that's sort of how I interacted with him, was the coach around the A's. That's the sort of part of his life that I got to see, and the kids loved him. I don't know if it's like the game has gone in his direction a little bit in terms of celebrations and stuff, or just that he was such an icon by himself. People respect you if you've done, great things in the game. But I think, it's also just his demeanor. Like he was very present and very sort of kind, and you could tell that he cared about the people he coached, So every time he came in to the Oakland clubhouse, it was just he was like a magnet. Just everybody wanted to talk to Rickey,
Yeah, a lot of great stories and memories flooding in. And there's I think it's Mike Piazza's memoir has a bit about playoff shares and how after playoff series or World Series, players are trying to decide who around the team also gets part or a full playoff share. And it goes down, it's as far as like people that work various roles around the stadium, right? And Rickey was always a guy that wanted to give everyone a full share because it could change people's lives, right? And I think those are the kinds of superstars, those are the kinds of people you want in the world that are trying to help others and go out of their way to do extra for those who need it more than they do. So Rickey Henderson gone too soon at the age of 65. Move on to our other rundown items for this episode. It's a lot of trades, as I mentioned up top. Phillies making a move to get Jesús Luzardo from the Marlins. And Luzardo is just one of those players that I think I've always had the belief that there is a very high ceiling. I've seen just enough flashes to keep on believing, even though this has kind of been almost a 5+ year endeavor now. And 2024, he had a stress reaction in his back. Only pitched 66 and 2/3 innings. So, the return the Marlins got here is very, very far down the road as far as the prospects. I believe it's Starlin Caba and Emarlon Boyd as the 2 players that are going back to Miami, multiple years away from being on the big league radar. But Luzardo kind of showed us 2 different things in his first 2 full seasons in Miami. In 2022, it was great ratios. Right, had the 104 whip to go to 3.32 ERA. And in 2023, it was the full season of health with the excellent strikeout rate, getting over 200 Ks for the first time. The challenge, I think, is that he's moving into a hitter-friendly home park for the first time in his career. And he's had home run problems even with Oakland and Miami as a home park throughout his career. So what kind of projection do you have on Luzardo? Have you lowered your ceiling expectations, unlike me, where I still think there's a special talent there?
Yeah, it's kind of hard to figure out for me because as a trade, because I think the stuff numbers are pretty obviously in decline. You can see it just if you look at his average fastball velocity, where he's gone from, 97 plus. What did he have? He had a 96.8 in 2023, and that was commensurate with his best times in Oakland. 95.5 was suddenly, in 2024, was suddenly Jesus Luzardo's worst fastball velo. And that sort of, under the hood, there's even more going on where, the fastball has gone from a 100 stuff plus in 2020 all the way down to 85 last year. And these are the new stuff numbers that I'm quoting, but you can see that this decline was pretty gradual, and kind of happened with every year. So the fastball's in decline, even at 27 for Jesus Luzardo. The slider, is a bit of a slurve, but stuff likes it. It's had good results. It's a good pitch. Changeup's okay. So a lot depends on that velo. So I guess they think either they see something biomechanically that they can fix, that they think he can get back to his old velo, because it's not great shape on the fastballs, or they think we can teach this guy a cutter and he can have 3 fastballs, because that's definitely a Phillies thing where they have a lot of fastballs. They want to have large arsenals. Or one of the things they might like about him is that he's not too expensive. He's $5.5 million, and he gives the Phillies, by the Fangraphs depth chart, the best rotation in baseball. And this is a team now that, in terms of money, Philadelphia Phillies are over the top luxury tax threshold. So right now their luxury tax payroll is $307 million, and the last threshold is $301. It's a lot of crazy penalties. Could they now trade Ranger Suarez, who is a free agent after the year and is due $8.9 million this year? Obviously Nick Castellanos is rumored to be on the block. He's got $20 million this year and next year. That'd be a lot of savings for them, because they're paying, double tax basically on that money. If they could, trade Castellanos, I think they would. So listen, we can have the debate about how much teams can spend, till the cows come home, but they are pretty heavily leveraged. They're one of the top 3 payrolls in baseball, and it's a little tight in this payroll situation. So I could see this as a precursor to something else where, giving them Luzardo gives them some, ability to maybe trade pitching. I don't think it'll be Andrew Painter, who's one of the best prospects in baseball. But it could be Ranger Suarez. Maybe they think they're selling high. We'll have to see if there's another shoe that's dropping, or if this was just, hey, how do we get a 5th starter for $5 million? It's Jesus Luzardo.
I think there's one other thing on Painter that I should throw in here real quick. Matt Gelb had a report from something Dave Dombrowski said, that Painter likely won't pitch in the majors until July-ish, which they have the depth to get by with that. And if they're going to backload his innings, then the goal is to get as many innings as possible at the big league level, and then stretch him out kind of carefully, maybe in the upper levels, the minors, until he's ready. So that's kind of an interesting wrinkle for Painter, but the addition of Luzardo sort of affords them the depth to do that. I think I also saw that, with Ranger Suarez being a free agent after 2025, maybe this gives them a built-in cost-controlled for one more year replacement for Suarez, who they expect to get a big payday this time next year. So it's a little bit of getting better right now and also staying at a similarly high level with the quality of that rotation for 2026 as well.
Yeah. I mean, it makes them a better baseball team. So that's how you can understand. And for all of my sort of worries about how good his fastball is and how, it's lost some ride and lost some zip over the last few years. As a 5th starter, there's a lot less pressure on him. There can be skipped starts. You've got Taijuan Walker and Joe Ross that can provide that depth if you want to keep him healthy. If you think the back thing is something from, overuse or whatever, there are ways that they can get the most out of Jesus Luzardo in this situation, rather than a team that's like, we need to start him. He's our ace. We need to start him every day, every time he can.
if there's a prospect to chase from the trade, it is Kaba, who I mentioned before for dynasty leagues, deeper leagues, though I don't think he's anybody's top 100 yet, but he has the ceiling to be an elite player down the road. It's just more of a, how long is the timeline in your keeper league if you're going to be interested in rostering him?
19 and an A ball. And he wasn't particularly good in A ball, but it was a small sample. And the nice thing that he does provide is he has a good eye at the plate and makes a lot of contact. So what you're hoping for is maybe trading a little bit of contact for power to round out that skill set. And I think most people think he's a defensive sort of stalwart. He's got a 45/80 field from Fangraphs. And 60/60 speed. Game power is 2035 future game power. So maybe they think maybe he won't ever get there. But could this be like an Xavier Edwards? I see some similarities there.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a question if the power will eventually develop. That's something we'll have to see in the years ahead for Kaba. With Luzardo, the team improvement probably offsets a lot of the loss in terms of park factors for me. Fantasy value doesn't change a lot. Maybe it goes up even a little bit, given the difficulty of winning enough when wins are a category. But I do think there's a handful of home starts now that I'll be a little more careful with than I would have been if he were still a member of that Marlins rotation, which, with guys coming off of injury will look better at the end of the season than it probably will at the beginning. Get Sandy Alcantara working his way back, Yuri Perez. I imagine this is good news as far as both Ryan Weathers and Edward Cabrera getting a really long look at starters again this year. Max Meyer probably is the biggest winner of all, as that depth chart thins out, as someone that they can try and give another full look at as a starter. I think that's the guy that I'm looking at and saying, okay, I'm maybe a little more interested in Max Meyer's opportunity now as a result of the Luzardo departure.
Yeah, I think Weathers is pretty interesting. We've got a. By the way, the projections. If anybody's a Google Doc user, the projections were updated on the 22nd with the new Stuff Plus numbers. And so Luzardo has a 3.98 there. I think it says he's on Philly, so I think that's adjusted for Philly. That's a little bit better than I thought. I thought it might have crossed over into 4, given the home run natures of that park. Ryan Weathers stays there, and we've got him projected for 24 games started, which is about half of his appearances. So basically half starter, half reliever, 4.21 ERA, 21% K percentage. I don't know if he immediately goes on my sleeper list, but he does have opportunity there because you've got Braxton Garrett, Sandy Alcantara, and Yuri Perez all coming back from injury. So if any of them are behind schedule, or I don't even know what their schedules are right now. To begin the season, the healthy 3 are Weathers, Cabrera, and Max Meyer. And you might put Beozo in there and Mazer if nobody else is healthy. There's going to be opportunity in there. It's just that I think the talent has really gone down in terms of starters in Miami. It's not as exciting as it used to be. I still have some hope for Edward Cabrera. I always will. That someday he'll figure it out. But this is a group other than Sandy Alcantara that I want to get late. And I want to get them in a situation where I don't have to put them in my lineup every day. I don't want to put them in my lineup on the road. I kind of want to use them at home mostly, and maybe even only at home against, lesser teams.
I mean, I think beyond Sandy, Yuri Perez is a special talent, but I think they're going to be very careful. He had surgery in April. I've been using 14 months instead of 12 for just about everybody's return. So that kind of puts him back in the June range, given how young he is. Maybe they play a little safer and it's closer to the All-Star break. So I think Yuri Perez is also sort of complicated from a redraft perspective, even though I think long term could still be really good.
When I was talking about guys I wouldn't want to start, I was talking about the healthy ones, the group he had made there. I don't really love any of them. At this point, I'm even realistic about Edward Cabrera. It's like, I know.
It is finally set in.
Thanks.
Wait, look who you're talking to. It takes me a long time to learn certain things too, man. It's okay. Paul Goldschmidt on the move. He signs with the Yankees, and there's a few interesting things about Paul Goldschmidt. It's only a 1-year deal because he's old. Makes sense. $12.5 million. Entering his age 37 season, and you have to wonder, is there any rebound potential, even just moving into Yankee Stadium and being in a better lineup and just having a better supporting cast than he did 2024 when things went so sideways in St. Louis? Like, I look at the hard hit rate, that was still really good, 48.1%, but he chased more than ever. We saw the worst slash line of Goldie's career at 245, 302, 414. That walk rate plummeted. You could tell with that 302 OBP. I think the rebound is maybe a slight one. I mean, that's what Steamer's pointing to. Steamer points to a 250, 325, 431 line, 24 homers in 642 plate appearances with about 80 runs and 80 RBIs, give or take a couple in either column. And I think that's still a pretty good player if that's exactly what the Yankees get out of Paul Goldschmidt. Do you buy that projection? Do you think he's still that guy?
We have that Jeff Zimmerman thing that I always quote, that the projected bounce backs for players over 32 are less believable. So, you can't, I wouldn't load up on Paul Goldschmidt. This is the kind of thing where you want to be opportunistic, and if it fits, it fits. The one reason that I am optimistic, though, is you're right. The hard hit was still there. 111.4 max EV was still there. The bell rate was still over 10%. And that chase rate, I kind of consider Paul Goldschmidt in some ways, yes, he's new school in that he learned to pull the ball in the air, and I'm sure he's gotten some of the best coaching. He doesn't really let people into his process too much, but I think there's a little bit element of old school to him, not only from the quotes I've gotten from him, but from the fact that he came into the league as a kind of an all fields hitter, an opposite field power guy. And, I like that for two reasons. One is he could have been actually trying to drive runs in last year. The Cardinals were decent enough, and there was a time when the Cardinals were in that race. The Brewers kind of, made that not a race near the end of the season. But I think we were looking in August, and it seemed like, they were still in the mix. If you are Paul Goldschmidt and you feel like you're all alone on an island in terms of you're the stud, you're the 3-hitter, maybe you open up and you chase some pitches you haven't chased in the past. That would make sense. The other thing that's true is that chase percentage is really, really sticky. It's one of the stickiest stats year to year. So for him to have like this 1 year, terrible chase rate. The last time he did this in 2019, his first year in St. Louis. Maybe he was chasing because he's like, hey, you traded for a stud. Here I am, The next year, he went right back to the league norms for 4 straight years. So I think he will actually, in a longer lineup, in a Yankees lineup where he's not the man that came in on a big deal. This is like, hey, you just fit in and get in kind of thing. And I think he'll return to normal on the chase rate. I, in fact, wouldn't be surprised if he had better than his 26% strikeout rate, which means that he could have a 260, 270 average there. He could beat his projections in some places. And 80 RBI, if he's in the lineup every day and he's hitting 25 homers and hitting 270 with like a 340 OBP, I think he'll beat the 80 RBIs he's projected for too. So, or RSBI if you're one of those people. In any case, I see enough here where I think the cost will be so low that, take some shots. I wouldn't want to look up and be like, when you do that player share thing, I wouldn't want to look up and be like, you have 8 shares of Paul Goldschmidt. Like, that's pretty heavily leveraged on a 37-year-old.
It's funny, though, and maybe because he landed with the Yankees and the park is such a good hitter's park, it'll change. There's a big ADP gap right now at first base, just looking at how things have been going down over at the NFBC, where you have this group from Christian Walker around pick 100 of first base eligible players that includes Cody Bellinger, Josh Naylor, Tristan Cassis, Vinny Pasquantino, Spencer Steer, and Jake Berger, all within 20 picks of each other. And you have to go 50 plus picks before you get to Goldschmidt. And Goldschmidt's kind of lumped at the top of a group that has Michael Tolia, Yandy Diaz, Luis Arias. All those other guys are much more categorically imbalanced. Goldschmidt still runs a little bit, probably doesn't hurt you in batting average, even if he doesn't help you. I could see him sort of bridging the gap ADP-wise. If the cost ends up being pick 140, pick 150, I think he's a guy I'll have on some teams. like you, don't want him everywhere, but I think there's enough here. I think there's also the question of, is he a Hall of Famer? Like, is he going to Cooperstown someday? Because the most similar player I think we've seen at his position in recent years is Joey Votto. I think if you're in on Votto, you're probably in on Goldschmidt. Maybe this year matters. Maybe any year that comes after this year for Goldschmidt could still be what makes the difference in the eyes of a lot of people. But you look at his career, it stacks up pretty favorably to first basemen that are in the Hall of Fame. And especially when you go back to his peak, 2013 to 2018, 6 consecutive All-Star games. I think he had 3 finishes where he was top 3 for the MVP. And then he actually won the MVP in 2022 during his time with the Cardinals at age 34 season. So he's put together a really nice career. And I think a lot of it sort of happened in a place in Arizona where the national spotlight just isn't very bright.
Yeah, I mean, traditionally, I sort of take notice when someone passes the 50 WAR threshold. A lot more Hall of Famers above 50 than below 50. He has, by Fangraphs, Paul Goldschmidt is a 56.5, and that's 146 all time. Ahead of Jeff Kent, Lance Berkman, Yadier Molina. Ahead of, I'm trying to find some Hall of Famers here, Vlad Guerrero, ahead of Joe Mauer, so he's, ahead of Bryce Harper. Of course, Harper has more years left to play. And so it gets complicated down there. Ahead of David Ortiz, very similar WRC plus. David Ortiz had a 140 WRC plus for his career, and I believe Paul Goldschmidt has 139. He's a little bit lacking on, I guess what people want out of the hard numbers in terms of 362 career homers. That's a little light for a first baseman, especially when we've kind of put a gold standard around numbers like 400 and 500 home runs. Seems like it might be a little bit low, but what if he plays a couple more seasons, if he plays a couple more seasons, he could get to 400. If he gets to 400 homers and, close to 60 WAR, I think he makes a lot better case. As it is, he'll be someone that people argue over.
Yeah, I think if that's the case for Goldie, it's going to be the case for Joey Votto, too. 4 Gold Gloves for Paul Goldschmidt already on the resume, too. So just curious to see where it goes, but I think he landed in a pretty good spot to give himself a better chance at a slight rebound here in 2025. Former Yankee on the move, Gleyber Torres signs with the Tigers, and it wasn't a big deal at all. It was 1 in 15 was the signing for Torres going to the Tigers. This is an infield where you have a lot of moving parts, a lot of options. It's probably not a completely fortified depth chart just yet. There could be another player that comes in. They could be players for Alex Bregman. There could be a trade. Lots of different ways this could be shaken up. But do you see a clear loser with Gleyber's arrival under the assumption that Gleyber is going to be a 600-plus plate appearance guy on this depth chart?
I think it might be Spencer Torkelson. The news is that Colt Keith is moving to first base. And I don't know that Gleyber has the arm for third. I suppose there could be a risk that Gleyber becomes a part-time player, but Colt Keith is also a right-hander, so there's no they'll just fall into a platoon situation. There's some talk of Spencer Torkelson. I think, at times he's played third base. He did in the minors, at least. I don't think he's a third baseman defensively. So then you talk about, okay, we'll move Tork to DH because Torkelson had a decent second half last year and kind of seemed to play himself back into the mix. Well, Kerry Carpenter plays DH most of the time. So if you push Kerry Carpenter more into the outfield, I guess that makes sense. Wenceel Perez is a switch hitter, though. That was pretty decent. So the losers for me are Wenceel Perez and Spencer Torkelson. Between them, one of them will be completely a backup. And, Matt Vierling is listed there with Wenceel Perez in right field. So Vierling, has a chance to lose some too.
Yeah, Vierling's always one of those guys where you could shave a little off the playing time projection, but it would never be so much to completely tank his value in the leagues where he's deep enough to be interesting.
Yeah, He's a deep league guy anyway. He's
perfect for
kind
AL
of like
only
one of your
leagues.
AL only plays where you hope to get him for not that much, and then people look up and he put up 450, 500 plate appearances and 18
Yep.
homers and 5 steals, and you're like, yeah, that was worth more than $2, guys.
Yep, $3 in the end game gives you $9 worth of value. Those are those are fun players to
I
have.
used to love those players when I played AL labor. I don't use them as much anymore.
Yeah, I wonder if the rest of the offseason actually dictates just how much Kerry Carpenter plays in the outfield, depending on like the best available hitter, and if that player's a lower caliber defender than Carpenter, then they just play Carpenter in right field. I think he's 45 games in right last year, 35 at DH, so it's not like they can't put him out there.
Young. I mean, he's 27. Like, are we really sure that he's a terrible outfielder? It's not. He's projected to be a terrible outfielder, but he hasn't. He's projected to be worse defensive value than he has been. I think that's because he's projected to be a DH. So they would actually get more wins above replacement from him, according to projections, if they put him in the outfield.
Yeah, I mean, it's an even 0 for outs above average for the 314 innings he was out there. Like that's not a problem. There are guys in free agency who are worse defenders in a corner who are going to get a lot of money. So you can trust Kerry Carpenter out there. I think if you're in the Tigers' shoes, there's still going to be some sort of loser here, because let's say you put Kerry Carpenter and you say in the outfield and you say, oh, that opens him up. Like maybe it's a Kerry Carpenter, Matt Vierling platoon in right. Okay, that's a lefty righty platoon, and Vierling can also play some center and some third, and he'll get his time. But whenever Kerry's out, Vierling plays right, and so we got DH. Oh, that's great. Well, Torkelson's a righty. And Justin Henry Eloy, who was Kerry Carpenter's, platoon mate in the playoffs, is a righty. Vierling's a righty. Keith is a righty. Gleyber Torres is a lefty. Righty. Oh, Keith's a lefty. Yeah.
Oh.
Torque's a righty, but Keith's a lefty. That's why it's such a bad thing for Torkelson.
Yeah. Yeah. And even okay, so you could say Torkelson platoons with Keith at right in first, and they were doing that. To some extent, maybe there's a winner here, which is maybe Parker Meadows is a winner. Because at some point, if you're platooning at first and DH and right field, you run out of places you can platoon.
Classic. Build a bench incoming in the spring for the Tigers once we have a more complete picture.
We need a few clues before we figure this one out. But yeah, DH is the place that you're circling if you're trying to project the Tigers and figure out some playing time.
I know it wouldn't play for a lot of people, but we could do a Blues Clues parody on the on the Build a Bench phase of life I'm in. Everyone, sorry, very sorry. Gleyber Torres trying to rebound at Comerica seems like a challenge, right? It's the opposite of the Goldschmidt situation where you're like, oh, okay, well, he got the deal that he wanted. He's going to a team that could be a playoff team again. He should still play a lot, but especially early in the year when it's cold, it's a very difficult place to hit. So where do we set expectations for Gleyber, who I assume is trying to get the multi-year deal next winter and now has to play half of his games in a more difficult home park? I wonder if the stolen bases might come back a little bit. He was only 4 for 7 in stolen base attempts in 2024, so maybe we see 8 or 10 bags. It's not like he's been wildly efficient over the course of his career, though, so I wouldn't go over the top in those projections. It's more a question of, like, where is the power going to check in having to play half his games in Detroit?
Yeah, looking at spray charts, Gleyber Torres is an opposite field hitter. Most of his fly balls are to the opposite field, and that's underscored by a real drop in hard hit and barrel rate for him, too. So I think this must be one of those situations where he was probably, talking to a lot of different teams in terms of, what he could be doing and, where he could be playing. And I feel like, the team that did finally pick him up, the Tigers, must have talked to him a little bit about what the plan was. They must have an idea, because they must be looking at what's happened and said, oh, we're going to do this with your swing, or we need to get you here, your contact point. And he must have liked what he heard, because I feel like for this kind of money at a 27-year-old who can play second base, then I feel like he had his choice of teams.
I'm also curious how this impacts the playing time of Jace Young, not because they were using him at second base at the big league level. He played there a bit in the minors a couple of years ago, but because of the Vierling situation at third. I mean, Jace Young, if he hits, he's a lefty. Maybe he ends up on the big side of platoon. But I think if you were looking at him as someone you thought was going to exceed expectations playing time wise for 2025, now you're probably tempering those expectations just a little bit. It might take him a little while to really earn that role. With the shortstop situation, Detroit too. Maybe this is the year with Jace Young.
Yeah, no, I just mean in terms of. So, if they platoon there, can they actually platoon at third, first, DH, and right field?
I think you can platoon four spots. You can platoon four if you want to.
You have 26. You have 13.
Well, it's really three because of the bench. Because the bench catcher.
One of them has to be a catcher. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really three. I don't think Torque's in a platoon, man. I think Torque's just flat. I think he's just gone. I think they're going to trade him, or he's just a bench guy. I don't think they're actually mixing and matching that much over there.
Yeah, because if we are going to do a little mini build a bench here, you have to have a catcher and a backup shortstop. And if you have that, and you have 9 starters and you have 13 pitchers, that means you have what am I coming up with? 11, 20, you have 2 more spots.
Right. So Dylan Dingler is the backup, or Jake Rogers is the backup eventually.
No, we have 2 spots beyond the backup catcher and the backup shortstop. The backup shortstop is, if you have Trey Sweeney, it's Javier Baez.
Right. And Baez can be the infield backup everywhere if you're going to keep him around. So then
you're going to keep Vierling. So that means you have 1 more roster spot for Malloy or Torkelson.
Man, Malloy's lack of defensive ability is going to crush him.
Malloy's back in the minors.
Sure looks like it, doesn't it?
And Torkelson is the DH, and until he loses his job, I guess.
It's good to have options, but yeah, not everyone's going to come away happy on this depth chart, I think, is the main takeaway there.
Something has got to give, too, because if you are using Vierling to platoon somewhere else, like in center, then you can't, or with Kerry Carpenter in right, then you can't also use him to platoon in third. So is Baez going to platoon in third? It's okay. This one is a little bit weird. This is going to be an interesting one.
We're going to have to consult Cody Stapenhagen, covers the Tigers for The Athletic at some point. Explain this to us, Cody. It is an absolute mess. Moving on to a more straightforward signing, Walker Buehler has a new home. He heads to Boston, getting a 1-year, $21.05 million deal. I point that out only because I think it's the exact amount of the qualifying offer. Now, the Dodgers didn't tender him a qualifying offer, in their words, I think because they didn't want him to have any difficulties on the market with the draft pick compensation attached. But I saw the exact dollar amount of the signing and thought, makes me think that he kind of wanted to stay with the Dodgers and would have happily accepted the qualifying offer if that was an option. But that sort of conjecture aside, how much do you believe in what we saw from Walker Buehler at the very end of the season? You talked about how the environmental conditions at Citi Field may have been just perfect for that start in the NLCS, where everything looked so crisp again. Obviously he was fantastic in the World Series too, but what version of Buehler are the Red Sox getting on this 1-year deal? Are they getting a guy who's going to come cruising back now that he's fully healthy and look like a vintage version of himself, setting himself up for a big payday next year? Or are we just at the phase of his career where, because of the injuries, the stuff's taken enough of a hit where there are still more questions than answers?
Yeah, I'm looking at the updated Stuff Plus numbers for Walker Buehler. 94 on the fastball, 97 on the knuckle curve, 101.5 on the sinker, 126 on the sweeper. So it's a possibility that they see that sinker sweeper combination and think, hey, to righties he's sinker sweeper, and to lefties he's just throwing everything at the wall. And he's going to be fastball, cutter, curve, with the occasional sinker and sweeper as well, just to be kind of a 5-pitch guy against lefties. What we, other than the stuff advancement we saw in the playoffs, which we don't know if we can believe in for various reasons in terms of environmental, headwind, temperature, whatever reasons. Beyond that, what he also seemed to do is command the pitches better in the playoffs. And I just remember a bunch of bounced curveballs from Walker Buehler during the season. If he's not bouncing, and if the command, which traditionally comes back, in year 2 after Tommy John surgery, if the command is back, we might actually see a version of Walker Buehler that we haven't yet seen. Because when I'm looking at these numbers, I see almost equal usage of 5 pitches. And of course, that's going to be what the Red Sox want, because they want him to dial down the 4-seam usage, which is what he used the most. And so we may see him in the end as somebody who throws 5 pitches 20% of the time, and ebbs and flows as far as his command goes. There is enough stuff here to bet on him. A sinker that's above 100 stuff plus is rare enough. A fastball at 94 is not great, but it's better than Jesús Luzardo's 85 or whatever. So, there's enough here to bet on. And in a 1-year deal, I'm surprised. I mean, maybe he liked what he heard from their pitching group. Maybe he just thought that if he put it together with Garrett Crochet and Tanner Houck and Brian Bayo, like, that could actually be a good rotation. And he definitely, this is a team that has been able to hit, and has maybe the number 1 prospect in baseball, and Christian Campbell. So to, kind of put this all together, he's like, this is a good opportunity. They'll probably be playing meaningful games. And if not, they'll trade me somewhere. They have a good, whatever their pitching team is saying to me, I like. So pretty good marriage for the Red Sox, who are always looking for pitching to add to their hitting, but maybe didn't want to get locked up into Corbin Burns' long-term deal. I mean, that's the other thing I would have done if I was the Red Sox, I guess.
Yeah, it's still possible that they could pull that off. We'll see where that chip falls probably in the next couple of weeks. But it's interesting that the early draft market has Walker Buehler sort of in this would you rather cluster with Luis Severino, who's now an A going to Sacramento, Ranger Suarez, who was phenomenal to start the season and then sort of kind of came back to typical Ranger Suarez levels. Michael Wacha, who just re-upped with the Royals this offseason. Nestor Cortez, who's been on the move in that trade from the Yankees to the Brewers. And then Jesús Luzardo, who we talked about earlier, all sort of clustered within about 20 to 25 picks of each other. Of that group, who do you actually like the most for 2025?
Nestor Cortez?
You like Nestor the most? That's interesting.
Yeah, I think I like Nestor the most.
Great results.
Pretty funky, and he's going to be facing a lot of people who have never seen him.
Yeah.
He's got underrated stuff. I think he has the best stuff of the group that you mentioned. He's got a big mix, a big enough mix. He's got command. Walker Buehler was projected for a 4.55 ERA using Stuff Plus before he signed with the Red Sox, and that's a difficult park. He's going to a more difficult park. Ranger Suarez. It would be my second pick, just because I think the floor is pretty high there. I think the floor is really low on Walker Buehler. The ceiling might be one of the better ceilings among the pitchers you said. So if you're just taking a shot in the dark on ceiling, then maybe you pick Walker there.
Yeah, I think I'm stuck between Nestor and maybe Luzardo. If everything still sounds good health-wise, and I think the last report was from MLB.com a week or so before he was traded. It felt like nothing happened, is what he had said, with that stress reaction in his back. Then maybe I'd take Luzardo first of the bunch, but that's where I'm at right now. I do think, I mentioned it when he was part of that trade, the home splits for Nestor Cortez are better than the road splits for his career, which is just mind-boggling for Yankee Stadium. I think he's safer getting out of that ballpark, even though the numbers don't really back that up. More pitching on the move, though, and this one actually is more of a staying put situation, but he had the chance to leave. Sean Manaea re-ups with the Mets 3 years, $75 million. You've talked about how the arm slot changed over the course of the year and everything started to play up throughout the second half. Are we comfortable with that as like a full-on adjustment by choice and not sort of this health-related, fatigue-related sort of maneuver? Like, I think that's the only real issue I have with Manaea. Maybe it's an I don't know sort of question, but he was 21st in innings pitched league-wide over the last 4 seasons, which is not something I thought we were going to say about Sean Manaea when he had a lot of injury problems earlier in his career.
For some of that.
Yeah. The Giants even held that down a little bit. So like, there's a little more workhorse there in the recent history than you would think. It's all relative, but 21st in the last 4 seasons, innings pitched.
Yeah, I think he's a fairly high floor guy that I think that they probably did a good job locking up because, we talked about how the Mets need innings. And like you said, he's probably okay for those innings. There's, of course, a little bit of risk with changing your arm slot. And this is a team that still has David Pederson and Clay Holmes listed as their 4th and 5th starters. So, I wouldn't be surprised if they get Corbin Burnes. I think this entire team looks so much better with Burnes, where you push everybody down and David Pederson becomes the 6th starter and everything is just slightly, looks slightly better with Corbin Burnes at the top there. So I would put the Mets as probably one of the teams that needs him the most, even after they sign Sean Manaea. But Sean Manaea, you think you're going to put 150 to 175 innings down. They're not going to be bad. And they could be really good. The park situation helps you in terms of fantasy, and all of his splits were better with the arm slot change. In terms of his strikeout rate, you had an August with an 11 K9 and a 2 walks per 9. He did return to earth a little bit in September. He only struck out 24% of the batters he saw in September, but a second half where he struck out 26% of the batters he saw and walked 7%. That's a good second half. That's where he deserved an ERA under 4. And if he can continue that, I don't. What's his ADP like? Like, what are you deciding on when you're getting Sean Manaea?
Yeah, about 100 picks earlier than the guys we talked about in the last Would You Rather, but you're looking at guys probably in a group from Christopher Sanchez, Taj Bradley, Zach Eflin, Brandon Pfaadt, Luis Heel, Seth Lugo, Sean Manaea, and Nick Pivetta, all within the span of about 20 picks of each other right now.
Probably won't end up with that much Sean Manaea. I just feel like there's more upside in those guys, and they all carry a fair amount of risk, whether it be injury or downside, just production downside. And so if I'm shopping in that bin, I'm probably looking for a guy that I want to play all year. I want to keep all year. That's the price, right? This is somebody you want to make it to the end of your roster, right? Or no?
Yeah. Even there's some guys that go after him that I think I like almost as much. I mean, Yu Darvish goes a little after him. Clark Schmidt goes about 40 picks after Sean Manaea. I don't think, and here's the thing too. I'm not buying in for a full repeat of the career best ratios.
Yeah.
I think you can get a high 3 ERA. I think you can get a 120s whip. I think you can probably get more innings than some people will project him for. So I'm probably a little more in on Manaea than you are. But I do think because of where he's being drafted, it will be easy to have only 1 or 2 teams with Manaea on them. That's kind of the way it works, just because of being more excited about other guys that go in that same region.
Sean Manaea versus Taj Bradley. It's like should they be near each other? Like, they don't seem very similar at all.
I think I'm reaching a point though where I'm much more likely to take Manaea in that toss-up than I used to be. I used to say Taj Bradley. Let's get the future ace. Let's get the guy that has the best stuff. It's like, no, let's get the guy that actually has figured it out a couple of different times in the big leagues and figure out the high upside shot a little bit later on.
It could be build specific too, and I might end up still doing the making the Bradley mistake if that's what it is, because I'm tending towards being a little bit more conservative and buying floor and innings with my earlier starters, just because I feel like innings are what you're looking for, and if you're buying an early starter, their floor is probably pretty high. You're not buying somebody it's higher than Sean Manaea's if you're buying an early starter, right? And so if I've been conservative and I got a lot of A health grades on my team, and then I feel like at this point I'll be like, time to get froggy, I
think we got to get that on a hat or a shirt. Time to get froggy. Let's move on to a couple of moves that are actually similar in nature. I have this tradition in my mom's family where when we're all out to eat or having a meal in someone's home, we start planning the next meal during the current one, which is absolutely just an insane thing to do. It's the opposite of living in the moment and enjoying what's in front of you, right? It's just like, oh, this is good, but the next one's going to be better. This pizza's fine, but the tacos we're going to get are going to be amazing. Like, just enjoy the pizza first, and then maybe after dinner, like, you can plan the next one. I think that's what happened with a couple of moves that went down this week. Nathaniel Lowe gets traded by the Rangers to the Nats, and then all of a sudden Jock Pederson signs with the Rangers. And yes, Jock Pederson's not a first baseman, but it's getting a left-handed hitter to replace Lowe and one that adds more power to the Rangers lineup. So I want to know, like, what are your overall thoughts on Pederson? Has anything really changed in terms of expected usage and opportunity? And did the Rangers actually get better by making these two moves?
Yeah, I suppose so. The defensive value that Nate Lowe brought to the table was replaced, in fact, by the move they made before that, was the Jake Burger trade. And we were trying to figure out exactly where Jake Burger was going to play, and now we know that he will play first base. Jock Pederson will play, will be at DH. As a hitter, I prefer Jock Pederson against righties. One thing that was nice about Nate Lowe is his approach made him virtually platoon neutral. He had almost zero platoon split over the last 4 years. In fact, he's one of them, maybe 10 players that has like a zero platoon split over the last 4 years. So Nate Lowe was someone that was good if you wanted to play him every day. And instead, the Rangers are going to more of a mix and match situation where Jock Pederson will play DH against right-handers. Jake Burger is probably more of an everyday starter at first, but you've got Ezekiel Duran, and Adolis Garcia and Josh Smith. I don't mean to mention Adolis Garcia is not a non-starter, but between Ezekiel Duran, Josh Smith, Evan Carter, you've got guys who can play corner outfield, DH, and first base against left-handers. And so they thought, this is a team, the Texas Rangers last year, they were 23rd in slugging percentage. So I think this is something that they wanted to address, and they figured it's easier to address power in a piecemeal way than it is to go and get the best power hitter on the market. And, instead of doing something like Soto or a Teoscar or Santander deal where they lock up a DH for a bunch of years, and Santander is a switch hitter and Teoscar is a right-hander. Mm-hmm. With Jock, they're like, hey, we get a bunch of left-handed power. We don't spend that much. He's not locked in for a bunch of years. And, we move around the pieces a little bit, but I think they're better at the end of it. Not that I not that I hate Nate Lowe. I think, for the Nationals, it's a nice little pickup because he's an everyday player for that team that, wants to have him for a few years, wants to lock up talent for a few years as they get better and grow into their status as maybe contenders in the next few years. They want somebody that they can depend on, whereas the Rangers are a team that it wants to win right now and wants to put the right pieces together to make a run while they have Jake DeGrom. To be frank, I think. And yes, they have a nice young core, possibly for the future in Wyatt Langford and Evan Carter and Josh Young. They also have Seager and Simeon, on the middle, that fit more into the DeGrom territory. So they've got established everyday stars at places, and they just wanted to have pieces that fit better around them. And I think this actually fits better around them.
Yeah, and as far as Lowe goes, I mean, it fills an area of need for the Nats at a pretty minimal cost, too. So I think the projection is almost unchanged for him. Should have a very clear runway to be a part of what should be an improving Nationals lineup here in 2025.
One last bit about it is that they have a bad bullpen.
They do.
And so trading for Robert Garcia, who did not have amazing numbers, in terms of results, 4.22 ERA, 1.19 WHIP, looked a lot better if you look under the covers a little bit. A 30% strikeout rate, 6% walk rate. That is a plus one K-minus BB even for a reliever. A 271 Sierra, 95 mile an hour fastballs. He's not necessarily the blow you away type, but in terms of our projections based on Stuff Plus, a 3.5 ERA with at least a 26% strikeout rate. All this built on the fact that Garcia has excellent stuff. I've got him here with Let's see here. I hate this. I can't. I have so many columns. I can't figure it out.
It's your own creation.
Huh?
It's your own creation.
I know, but it's the new columns. I think he's got plus stuff. I think, and the reason I wanted to find that is that I think he might be one of the contenders maybe for closing.
Yeah.
Like, who's the closer right now for you in Texas?
I don't think they have one. So
you think it's somebody they haven't signed yet?
Or haven't traded for yet? Maybe there's another trade coming.
Yeah, but even if they do sign a closer, having Garcia makes this team better. Like right now, the depth chart is Jacob Webb, Robert Garcia, Sean Armstrong, Hobie Milner.
Yeah, it's not Hobie Milner.
It's not Milner. I don't think it's Armstrong. He's gotten a chance.
I like Hobie Milner. Hobie Milner is just left-handed funk, right? So
yeah,
you just
it's
easy cross him off the list for saves. But
Dane Dunning is in this bullpen. Like, it's this bullpen still needs help, and so even if they do sign a closer, Robert Garcia will help them set up at the very least, and. So it does seem a little bit weird. The one last thing about this is Nate Lowe's been on in two of these deals where maybe you could say that the market undervalues decent first baseman. Like he's not like a future Hall of Famer, not a great first baseman, but he's been a decent one. He has for Texas had like a 29 WRC plus, and the Rays traded that away. Well, they had like a 29 WRC plus on the first baseman they had since he's been gone. So, the league is trending a little bit more towards the Rays and New Rangers, where they're like, we'll find a first baseman. We'll create one in the aggregate. Jake Berger and Ezekiel Duran. So I just wonder. It's just funny to see him now traded for a reliever with still like 3 years of team control left. Suggests that Nate Lowe is possibly a market, represents a market blip. Like maybe he's more valued than the market. He's now been traded for as a collective item. He's been traded twice. He's been traded for Robert Garcia and who did the Rays get back?
Nobody else has made a big league impact yet in the other trade.
That Hedbert guy that didn't make it.
Heriberto Hernandez, Alexander
Perez.
Oslevis Basabe. Like nobody made a big impact in that trade. It's weird.
So far, he's been the best player he's been traded for, and not twice.
Yeah, might happen again. You just never know. But the similar deal that I was hinting at before, Josh Naylor gets traded to Arizona, and then within seconds, it was almost like a connected news item, connected tweet, connected post on Blue Sky. Carlos Santana returns to Cleveland. It's like, oh, wait, you traded Josh Naylor to save money, but then you gave the money to Carlos Santana, which is kind of cool. It comes back to the place where he broke in, and those stories are always fun. Okay, so why did Cleveland do this? Slade Ciccone is the player they got back. So they got a pitcher out of the deal as well. So they didn't just flip first baseman. They got a usable, maybe a back-end starter that they could possibly tweak. I know there were times when Ciccone looked pretty good in the model, and I was taking chances on him in deeper leagues, and he was getting smashed. But the Guardians have a great reputation for developing pitching, so perhaps a tweak or two could make him a good option for them as a fourth or fifth starter.
Well, it's a collection of okay pitches. 104 stuffless curveball for Slade Ciccone, a 99 slider, a 95 change, a 91 fastball. It's not a great fastball. All of them he located well. So the way I describe him is the way you might describe every Cleveland pitcher for the last decade, give or take a few, which is big mix, good command, bad fastball. But
what's the key difference? I mean, the velo's not as bad as some of their starters. 94.5 on the fastball is not cover your eyes scary for That's velocity true. At this point. And I think in a world where the Alex Cobbs go for $15 million for 1 year, a guy that could still be optioned for another year on the minimum is a pretty nice player to get back if you believe you can get sort of back end results. I think it's possible. I think there are still some tweaks that could be made here that could make Slade Cecconi at least a useful back end arm from a real life perspective, even if we're not necessarily chasing him for our fantasy leagues.
Yeah, but I just this leaves me cold. I don't like this arrangement of moves in order. Yes, you went from a two WAR first baseman, maybe slightly overvalued by the WAR framework. In the WAR framework, maybe slightly overvalued in terms of how much he costs and what he's giving you. And so you went from him to like a 1.5 win guy, except that the 1.5 win guy who plays more defense and isn't as good on offense is 38 years old. So there's a chance of like complete and total collapse, which, as an organization, you say, well, we have Kyle Manzardo. So, if Carlos Santana doesn't work out, we DFA him and then we play Kyle Manzardo. Well, then, you just went from Josh Naylor to Kyle Manzardo. You didn't have to, and I guess what they're saying is, well, we haven't been actually that good at developing pitching recently. That hasn't been working out that well. And we've been having more injuries than we used to have. And so we need to cover our butt with something other than one of the, I feel like there's 4 Logan Allens in baseball.
There are at least 3 that I know of. I don't know about the 4th yet. Like, I don't know if my brain can handle that right now.
I don't think any of them are that good. So I'm just like, we have a Logan Allen. We have 2 Logan Allens. It's not enough. No, I'm not. I think Cecconi is a step above the Logan Allens in the world. But right now, out of the back end of their starting 5 is Tristan McKenzie at 5, Shane Bieber at 6, who's not due back until halfway through the season, and Jorge Cantillo, who's been good but oft injured. So I think they said we are paper thin at starting pitching, and that's how the last season ended up too. Was we barely had enough starting pitching at the end of the season, so we need more starting pitching. I get that, I guess, but Naylor was one of the few studs on this team that you could be like, okay, we have a stud. Right now, offensively, who are the studs for the Cleveland Guardians? You have Jose Ramirez and Steven Kwan.
Yeah, I mean, Lane Thomas against lefties is a stud. Manzardo maybe could be that guy, but the same questions we've been asking about this team for the last couple of seasons are still there. Instead of adding another bat like Naylor somewhere, they went
right.
the other
That's
direction.
What I would have thought. I was like, just add it. You need another Naylor. You need at least another good hitter. Left-handed power would have been nice.
Yeah, and the Naylor brothers don't get to play together anymore. That's a little bummer for them. I assume they like playing together.
I would find this if I was a Cleveland fan, I'd find this a bummer. As much as you can be like, oh, Cecconi, like if he puts it together, I'd find this, sequence of events to be a bummer.
All right. Well, let's try to find one thing to be excited about from the very end of the show. I was excited about this because, as I've mentioned before on this show, when I like a player and the Rays like a player, it makes me feel smart. Even if there's no like concrete proof that, I'm right, I just feel good about it. Eloy Jiménez signs with the Rays. It's only a minor league deal. I think it's $2 million if he ends up making the opening day roster, maybe some escalators and stuff in there, but basically for nothing. They're taking the shot. And there's a fun fact about Eloy Jiménez. Did you know 2024 was the first time in Eloy Jimenez's big league career that he wasn't a league average or better hitter by WRC+?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, like, there have been many, many worse players teams have taken flyers on over the years. I'm surprised that it's this is a really small. This guy, having no defensive value and being the kind of guy that has a low OBP, a lower OBP than you'd expect, doesn't strike out a lot, but he also doesn't walk a lot. It's an odd fit, but he just turned 28, man. Like I don't look. Maybe the fit wasn't perfect because they wanted Carlos Santana so bad.
Yeah.
But if you're the Guardians, why don't you play Manzardo at first and sign Eloy Jiménez and go do something else on the roster instead of spending that money on Carlos Santana, which maybe I'm dismissing what he brings in the clubhouse and the defensive value. I get that he brings that stuff too, but
at 38, it could be over at any moment.
Right. The collapse potential on a player at that age is just extremely high. And I guess we were talking about Paul Goldschmidt at 37 with a lot more optimism. So it's all relative.
But Paul Goldschmidt's coming from a higher peak, offensively at least. And then Eloy is 28. He's 28.
I couldn't believe that those were the terms. I saw that he signed with the Rays. I was like, oh, probably like 1-5, 1-7, something like that. When like a decent guaranteed deal. I was like, really? That was the best offer? Or, and again, don't know this, just wondering, maybe this is a place where he thought he could get it right.
And he's going to be cheap all the way through draft season, because without that roster spot, you don't know, and you won't even know that he's made the roster. I mean, maybe they'll start talking about it. Maybe the manager says, yeah, he made it, but they probably won't say that. They'll probably say, hey, we're evaluating everything. We're going to make a decision. And he may not be put on the roster until opening day, because you don't have to. You know what I mean? And so, just keep in mind that he still hit the ball 112 last year. He hit the ball hard over 95% of 95 miles an hour, 49% of the time. He still hits the ball hard, and he had a 20% strikeout rate. So, this is a team that has gotten a lot out of Yandy Diaz. And Yandy Diaz has a better eye at the plate, but he hits the ball hard and on the ground. They don't mind this at all. And I think they say, well, either you hit the ball hard on the ground and you have like a 330 BABIP if you're healthy, and that's how you get a little bit of value about hitting the ball hard, or we help you lift the ball a little bit better, which Eloy has done in the past too. He's had better than 56% ground ball rates like he did last year. So just starting with someone who hits the ball hard and makes contact is totally a Raisian play. And we won't know until opening day that he's made the roster. So, he won't cost much anywhere. I'm not saying to get him with a high pick or anything, but I'm saying this is one of those things that makes sense for almost any bench. I don't know about 10 teams or whatever, but most benches, because what you say is, if he's on there, then he's probably playing some, and he has the parts to do something good with playing time. And if he's not on the roster, then I'll know immediately, because they have to put him on the roster. I guess the middle ground is they put him on the roster and they don't play him that much. And as a righty, could he be in a platoon with Jonathan Aranda for DH? Maybe. But do you keep Jonathan Aranda in the major leagues to platoon with Eloy Jiménez at DH?
I mean, if you like what you have at other positions, you can. We've seen a couple teams do this, platoon in that spot. I think ideally Aranda plays enough first base where you're not doing that all the time. I do think it's funny if you imagine March 30th, which I think is the first fab run this year. So, move ahead 3 months on the calendar, get through the coldest days of winter and get to our brightest eyed optimism in fab for the first fab run of the year, that first weekend in March. Can you imagine, with a big weekend series to start the year, Eloy Jiménez in 12-team leagues actually getting picked up for like $75 in fab because he starts all 3 games and homers twice? Like I can see that. I can tell myself that story. Those are the lies that I tell myself.
Raise magic. Yeah, I mean, you gotta be careful then. Even if that happens, don't spend 75% of your fab.
No, not 75%. Just like $75 out of 1,000, like 7%. Yeah. But even a 12-team league, that was the
people. I mean, if you do get 3 games before you get to pick him up, you're counting how many games he's playing against righties.
Yep,
because you could actually have done that a little bit in Baltimore and kind of seen the slide was when he stopped playing against righties. That's when I was dropping him last year.
I think we'll find a point somewhere this season where Eloy Jiménez has value in 12-team leagues again. It might not be through draft season, but I think it will happen. I think there's still enough there to like. He's had a lot of bad injuries, some fluky ones mixed in there. The skills around all of that are still intriguing enough for me. I will fail trying to get it right one more time with Eloy Jiménez, and I'm glad the Rays are
the one nice
my
thing
corner.
About failing repeatedly is that the cost is lower every time.
Right, and you become numb to the failure. That's the other secret to repeat failure. But if anybody wants life hacks, I've got a lot of them.
Keep slamming that head against the wall. At one point, the head's numb. It's just...
He just doesn't hurt anymore. I think on that note, we are going to go. You can join our Discord with the link in the show description instead of hitting your head on the wall.
Shout out to the Discord. It was valuable to me just to see you guys kind of talk about the Hall of Fame vote. And I did vote for Abreu in the end. Russell Martin. I put some links in there in the Discord for reading on Russell Martin and the kind of stuff that I was looking at to make my decision in the end. Couldn't quite get there. Between McCann, Molina, and Martin, we're going to have a lot of discussions about not enough catchers in the Hall of Fame. What is the true value of framing? And so I went with McCann first just because he had the best offensive numbers of the 3. But if you're going to tell me, in a couple of years that Yadier Molina needs to be in the Hall of Fame, then maybe Russell Martin will start getting my vote again on the back end.
looking forward to a decade of people arguing about catchers. That's going to be a highlight of our time on social media. You can find us on Blue Sky. Eno's at enosaris.bsky.social. I'm dvr.bsky.social. That's going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. We're back with you next week.
Thanks for listening.